labeling the legislators cowards. On December 31st and January 3rd, the defendant repeatedly raised with the acting Attorney General and acting Deputy Attorney General the allegation that in Pennsylvania there had been 205,000 more votes than voters. Each time, the Justice Department officials informed the defendant that his claim was false. On January 6, 2021, the defendant publicly repeated his knowingly false claim that there had been 205,000 more votes than voters in Pennsylvania. Wisconsin. On November 29, 2022, a recount in Wisconsin that the defendant's campaign had petitioned and paid for did not change the election result, and in fact increased the defendant's margin of defeat. On December 14th, the Wisconsin Supreme Court rejected an election challenge by the campaign. One justice wrote, "Nothing in this case casts any legitimate doubt that the people of Wisconsin lawfully chose Vice President Biden and Senator Harris to be the next leaders of our great country." On December 21st, as a result of the state Supreme Court's decision, the Wisconsin governor, who had signed a certificate of ascertainment on November 30th, identifying Biden's electors as the state's legitimate electors, signed a certificate of final determination in which he recognized that the state Supreme Court had resolved a controversy regarding the appointment of Biden's electors, and confirmed that Biden had received the highest number of votes in the state and that his electors were the state's legitimate electors. That same day, in response to the court decision that had prompted the Wisconsin governor to sign a certificate of final determination, the defendant issued a tweet repeating his knowingly false claim of election fraud and demanding that the Wisconsin legislature overturn the election results that had led to the ascertainment of Biden's electors as the legitimate electors. On December 27th, the defendant raised with the acting Attorney General and the acting Deputy Attorney General a specific fraud claim that there had been more votes than voters in Wisconsin. The acting Deputy Attorney General informed the defendant that the claim was false. On January 6, 2021, the defendant publicly repeated knowingly false claims that there had been tens of thousands of unlawful votes in Wisconsin. The defendant's use of dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to organize fraudulent slates of electors and cause them to transmit false certificates to Congress. As the defendant's attempts to obstruct the electoral vote through deceit of state officials met with repeated failure, beginning in early December 2020, he and his co-conspirators developed a new plan to marshal individuals who would have served as the defendant's electors had he won the popular vote in 7 targeted states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and cause those individuals to make and send to the Vice President and Congress false certifications that they were legitimate electors. Under the plan, the submission of those fraudulent slates would create a fake controversy at the certification proceeding and position the Vice President presiding on January 6th as President of the Senate to supplant legitimate electors with the defendant's fake electors and certify the defendant as president. The plan capitalized on ideas presented in memoranda drafted by co-conspirator 5, an attorney who was assisting defendant's campaign with legal efforts related to a recount in Wisconsin. The memoranda evolved over time from a legal strategy to preserve the defendant's rights to a corrupt plan to subvert the federal government function by stopping Biden electors' votes from being counted and certified as follows. A. The November 18th memorandum, Wisconsin memo, advocated that because of the ongoing recount in Wisconsin, the defendant's electors there should meet and cast votes on December 14th, the date the ECA required appointed electors to vote. To preserve the alternative of the defendant's Wisconsin electors slate in the event that the defendant ultimately prevailed in the state. B. The December 6th memorandum, fraudulent elector memo, marked a sharp departure from co-conspirator 5's Wisconsin memo, advocating that the alternate electors originally conceived of to preserve rights in Wisconsin instead of being used in a number of states as fraudulent electors to prevent Biden from receiving the 270 electoral votes necessary to secure the presidency on January 6th. The fraudulent elector memo suggested that the defendant's electors in 6 purportedly contested states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, should meet and mimic as best as possible the actions of the legitimate Biden electors, and that on January 6th, the vice president should open and count the fraudulent votes, setting up a fake controversy that would derail the proper certification of Biden as president-elect. C. The December 9th memorandum, fraudulent elector instructions, consisted of co-conspirator 5's instructions on how fraudulent electors could mimic legitimate electors in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Co-conspirator 5 noted that in some states it would be virtually impossible for the fraudulent electors to successfully take the same steps as the legitimate electors because state law required formal participation in the process by state officials or access to official resources. The plan began in early December, and ultimately the conspirators and the defendant's campaign took the Wisconsin memo and expanded it to any state that the defendant claimed was contested, even New Mexico, which the defendant had lost by more than 10% of the popular vote. This expansion was forecast by emails the defendant's chief of staff sent on December 6th, forwarding the Wisconsin memo to campaign staff and writing, "We just need to have someone coordinating the electors for states." On December 6th, the defendant and co-conspirator 2 called the chairwoman of the Republican National Committee to ensure that the plan was in motion. During the call, co-conspirator 2 told the chairwoman that it was important for the RNC to help the defendant's campaign gather electors in targeted states, and falsely represented to her that such electors' votes would be used only if ongoing litigation in one of the states changed the results in the defendant's favor. After the RNC chairwoman consulted the campaign and heard that work on gathering electors was underway, she called and reported this information to the defendant, who responded approvingly. On December 7th, co-conspirator 1 received the Wisconsin memo and the fraudulent elector memo. Conspirator 1 spoke with co-conspirator 6 regarding attorneys who would assist in the fraudulent elector effort in the targeted states, and he received from co-conspirator 6 an email identifying attorneys in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. The next day, on December 8th, co-conspirator 5 called the Arizona attorney on co-conspirator 6's list. In an email after the call, the Arizona attorney recounted his conversation with co-conspirator 5 as follows. "I just talked to the gentleman who did that memo, co-conspirator 5. His idea is basically that all of us, Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona, Pennsylvania, etc., have our electors send in their votes, even though the votes aren't legal under federal law because they're not signed by the governor, so that members of Congress can fight about whether they should be counted on January 6th. They could potentially argue that they're not bound by federal law because they're Congress and make the law, etc. Kind of wild/creative. I'm happy to discuss. My comment to him was that I guess there's no harm in it, legally at least, i.e. that we would just be sending in fake electoral votes to Pence so that someone in Congress can make an objection when they start counting votes and start arguing that the fake votes should be counted." At co-conspirator 1's direction, on December 10th, co-conspirator 5 sent to points of contact in all targeted states, except Wisconsin, which had already received his memos, and New Mexico, a streamlined version of the Wisconsin memo, which did not reveal the intended fraudulent use of the defendant's electors, and the fraudulent elector instructions, along with fraudulent elector certificates that he had drafted. The next day, on December 11th, through co-conspirator 5, co-conspirator 1 suggested that the Arizona lawyer file a petition for certiorari in the Supreme Court as pretext to claim that litigation was pending in the state to provide cover for the convening and voting of the defendant's fraudulent electors there. Co-conspirator 5 explained that co-conspirator 1 had heard from a state official and state provisional elector that it could appear treasonous for the Arizona electors to vote on Monday if there is no pending court proceeding. To manage the plan in Pennsylvania, on December 12th, co-conspirator 1, co-conspirator 5, and co-conspirator 6 participated in a conference call organized by the defendant's campaign with the defendant's electors in that state. When the defendant's electors expressed concern about signing certificates representing themselves as legitimate electors, co-conspirator 1 falsely assured them that their certificates would be used only if the defendant succeeded in litigation. Subsequently, co-conspirator 6 circulated proposed conditional language to that effect for potential inclusion in the fraudulent elector certificates. A campaign official cautioned not to offer the conditional language to the other states because the other states are signing what he prepared. If it gets out, we change the language for Pennsylvania, it could snowball. In some cases, the defendant's electors refused to participate in the plan. On December 13th, co-conspirator 5 sent co-conspirator 1 an email memorandum that further confirmed that the conspirators' plan was not to use the fraudulent electors only in the circumstances that the defendant's litigation was successful in at least one of the targeted states. Instead, the plan was to falsely present the fraudulent slates as an alternative to the legitimate slates at Congress's certification proceeding. On December 13th, the defendant asked the senior campaign advisor for an update on what was going on with the elector plan and directed him to put out a statement on electors. As a result, co-conspirator 1 directed the senior campaign advisor to join a conference call with him, co-conspirator 6, and others. When the senior campaign advisor related these developments in text messages to the deputy campaign manager, a senior advisor to the defendant, and a campaign staffer, the deputy campaign manager responded, "Here's the thing. The way this has morphed, it's a crazy plan, so I don't know who wants to put their name on it." The senior advisor wrote, "Certifying illegal votes." In turn, the participants in the group text message refused to have a statement regarding electors attributed to their names because none of them could stand by it. Also on December 13th, at a campaign staffer's request, co-conspirator 5 drafted and sent fraudulent elector certificates for the defendant's electors in New Mexico, which had not previously been among the targeted states, and where there was no pending litigation on the defendant's behalf. The next day, the defendant's campaign filed an election challenge suit in New Mexico at 11:45 a.m., 6 minutes before the noon deadline for the electors' votes as a pretext so that there was pending litigation there at the time the fraudulent electors voted. On December 14th, the legitimate electors of all 50 states and the District of Columbia met in their respective jurisdictions to formally cast their votes for president, resulting in a total of 332 electoral votes for the defendant and 306 for Biden. The legitimate electoral votes that Biden won in the states that the defendant targeted and the defendant's margin of defeat were as follows. Arizona, 11 electoral votes, 10,457 votes. Georgia, 16 electoral votes, 11,779 votes. Michigan, 16 electoral votes,